to everybody. A wonderful good morning to everybody and a very warm welcome on site and online to the ACE Climate Change and Built Heritage Hybrid Conference. This conference will be hybrid in its best way. You will experience that in many different ways. You see, ACE has a new visual identity in green, and we are embracing the fact that we are co-founded with this conference by the Creative Europe program of the European Union. We are here in a conference venue, and I think this is fantastic for our subject, which derives from 1954. So all these walls are kind of breathing time. And when I learned that, I just imagined how has been the CO2 emission in 1954. So just with this in mind, we are coming together 2 days before the COP26 taking place in Glasgow under UK presidency. My name is Andrea, THILO, and I'm very honored to be your facilitator. I had already the honor to facilitate another ACE conference, so I'm very happy to be here. Let me just quickly start with a statement from ACE and a figure. And it says, it is estimated that over the next 40 years, 230 billion square meters will be built worldwide, adding the equivalent of the area of Paris to the planet every single week. It appears very clear that we must urgently change the way our built environment is designed, built, maintained, renovated, operated and regulated if we are to meet our climate objectives. So all these subjects are the kind of the backdrop of this day's conference. Thank you all very much for attending here in the room and in safety distance at home. Of course, we are all here in safety distance too. We have a fully packed day with very inspiring speakers to address, of course, these incredible challenges, to highlight pathways towards the transmission and to discuss how high quality architecture can really add to try to mitigate climate change. So we have an interpretation from English to French and vice versa. So my first big thanks goes to our dear fellow translators in the box above. Thank you for your fantastic job. Your questions, dear audience, are very, very warmly welcome. Please use the chat on Zoom. Also here in the room, we are very happy if you connect via the chat. If you have any technical problems, please also use the chat. You will be helped. I hope many of you know Slido. Slido is a fantastic participative tool. We will use it often during the day. You have two possibilities. Either you go on slido.com and you enter the code 234, also here in the room, or because we have a lot of polls and we are really interested to have as many people as possible for the results, or you use your smartphone parallelly to the conference and go with your smartphone through the QR code. You just put the camera on that QR code and you will be directed to Slido and put in the conference code 234. Of course, we are very glad, and I hope you are digitally highly connected if you use Twitter. And our Twitter account is ACE Climate Conf with the F at the end. Dear speakers on site, if you come up stage, please use that entrance. And you always take the microphone from the left side. Of course, we have a microphone for each fellow speaker. And big thanks to the European Union again to make this possible. And a big thanks to Georg PENDL, because I think if you weren't here, that would not be the conference we have. Let me introduce, please, what about a short applause for Georg PENDL if I introduce him as an architect from Innsbruck and also as the ACE president. Thank you very much for being here. Georg, I come back to the words of Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the Commission, who says we should make the renovation wave a cultural project. I think this is also kind of your mindset. Why is that absolutely key for you?
It makes an enormous, it can make, and I'm looking forward that it can make an enormous difference in as you say, in the mindset, in the principle thinking, and the approach, how we deal our built environment, that we don't deal it only in, as it has been done, I must say, by the Commission this far, in a purely quantitative way, counting beans, as I always say, a bit unsharp perhaps, but still. But to have the core of the thinking, the mindset is that this is culture. It has to do with our culture, with the European, specific European culture, how we approach our planning, our doing, our working, our building.
Yeah, but often culture is seen, let's say, as a nice surplus, nice to have as a soft factor. I think you see it very differently. And I would like to know, from your perspective and the ACE's perspective, what are the tools and ways, if for the CO2 emissions, the building sector is responsible globally for 40% of the emissions. So what are the tools on the cultural pathway?
I give you an example for the first part of the question. What is culture in this respect?
Yeah.
I have had and still have a very good experience in my country, in Austria, where the ASFINAG, these are the Austrian highways, the Austrian roads company who run the roads, a purely engineered, sorry for the engineers, marinated club of people doing well and very good work. But they always saw that design, this is some surplus, we add something which we could also leave away. And 10 years ago, there was started an advisory committee, which was started by the head of this company who was interested in Baukultur, basically. And through this process, we had, in the year, we had 4 meetings, and the process took some years, but after 5-6 years, you could see a change. The engineers understood what we are talking about, that we don't talk about just the reeling and the surface of the reeling and such things, but we talk about how do we basically start to plan a bridge and so on.
And we will talk a lot about materials and use of materials and cultural heritage, as already in the title today. I would like to know, this is the 4th conference, if I'm right, under your umbrella? 4th? Kind of.
Yes, 4.
Okay, let's say 4th. So how does that conference bridge to the understanding and the DNA of the conferences before?
It bridges because the first conference we did together, this was about reuse of built heritage. So it was already there where we have to be now. And just to referring to this, it's my favorite sentence at the moment is demolition as an exception. Not only listed buildings, all buildings have a value. And I don't mean that no demolition is possible, but I mean that the trigger is different. It's not automatic that you demolish. You don't need a permission even. You just take it away. You have to have a permission to demolish a building. Then there is an assessment and a procedure, and the direction of the thinking is different.
I'm very much looking forward. We have a lot of discussions. We have many panels to go into depth, for example, at that point. What are you expecting from today? Like, honestly.
I mean, because the thing what the President Ursula von der Leyen said, this needs us all. We all have to participate. We have to be active. We have to propose the solutions. We have to propose the new paths to go. And this conference is a call to be active, to join us, to change the way of thinking, to change the way of planning, to change the clients, perhaps?
Oh, big questions at the very beginning of this day. So I'm very much looking forward. I'm leaving the stage because we have a wonderful first guest.
And I stay here? No,
I think you are facilitating now. No, you will introduce Thomas Vonier. So I leave and you go on.
Okay, next I want to introduce Thomas Vonier, my dear friend, who is the president, who has the past president of the Union Internationale d'Architecte, and he has some words for us, please.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning to all of you. I have just completed a term of 4 years as president of the International Union of Architects. Can you start the slides for me, please? For those of you who do not know, the International Union of Architects was founded 73 years ago in 1948 in Lausanne, Switzerland. It's headquartered in Paris, but it is now in the Tour Montparnasse. The founding president of the union was Auguste Perret, who is considered to be the progenitor of reinforced concrete and reinforced concrete design. Perret and the other founders, including Pierre Vagot from Hungary, were men, and they were all men, who had experienced the Second World War and the enormous destruction of the Second World War. Perret himself, with his brother, redesigned Le Havre, rebuilt Le Havre, which had been devastated by Allied bombing in the war, and it is now part of UNESCO's World Heritage. The UIA has a long and distinguished record of working with the United Nations, and in particular with UNESCO. Many people don't know that the Sydney Opera House, the Centre Pompidou, and a number of other buildings are all products of design competitions that were organized by the UIA with the United Nations UNESCO organization. We recently signed, and some of you in the room were part of making it possible, a World Capital of Architecture program with UNESCO. Rio de Janeiro was the first such city, and Copenhagen will be next. All of these efforts were founded on this principle and this idea. I want to leave the message today that we have to look beyond Europe. We are a planet now of 7.5, perhaps 8 billion people. Within my lifetime, 9. Within the lifetime of our children, 10 and perhaps more billion. At the present time, an enormous number of those people build for themselves with whatever they can find, wherever they can. And that means that our largest cities in the world take on this divided character, this dichotomous character of safety, danger, education, ignorance, poverty, and wealth. And they take on this physical characteristic. That is one reason why the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations were adopted by the 100+ countries of the world. It is a fundamental expression of a resolve to redress these injustices and imbalances. We are all familiar, I think, with the work of architects like Francis Quéré, Alejandro Aravena, and others who have worked so hard to try and apply design skills to the problems of the impoverished. And that's one reason why our Commission on Sustainable Development Goals has developed this publication, which I'm going to commend to you, on showing examples of how every single one of the 17 goals has been addressed by architects somewhere in the world. We had resolved that we would do no more preaching. There would be no more saying, we have a problem, we have to do something. It's now time to talk about what the solutions are and what people have been doing to address these things. So every one of the 17 is addressed, from reducing poverty to ending hunger to improving equity. And I'm giving you this link. I think it will appear in the chat channels for those of you who are connected digitally. I recommend these publications to you. It's an enormous database of projects all over the world. As architects, we have an enormous opportunity, I think, presented by the pandemic to re-examine public space and how we use public space and what the devotion of public space is. Historically, it has been to automobiles. There are a number of architects now, including this woman in Copenhagen, who are working to develop designs that will overcome the dominance of the automobile in our built environment. I think that's relevant to Europe as much as it is to North America. We have seen the difficulties the mayor of Paris, where I live, has encountered in trying to battle the automobile, but it's a noble cause and one that I think we should all devote ourselves to. I close by reminding you of the principle upon which the International Union of Architects was founded, which I think remains relevant today, and with the idea that what is good for people is good for the planet. And if we remember that, I think we'll make great progress. I want to extend my thanks to your president for having invited me, and my congratulations to him on his term of office, which I understand will conclude sometime soon. And I wish you all well for the conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Thank you very much for this speed dating of ideas and values at the very beginning of that conference. Now we bridge immediately to our next great speaker. I'm glad to leave the floor in a minute for Kristiaan. BORRET, he's Bouwmeester, I hope I spell it right, Maître d'Architecte of Brussels Capital Region since 2015 until 2014. He had the same responsibility for the city of Antwerp. And what is the Bouwmeester? The Bouwmeester is an independent government official who stimulates and supervises the quality of urban development projects. And I think in this function, he left a lot of impact on wherever he went. So I leave the stage for you, Kristiaan. Very glad to have you here.
Thank you, and good morning to all of you. I guess some of people know what the Bouwmeester is. The Bouwmeester is really indeed a kind of official working for the government, but in an independent way. So it's really a hybrid thing, in and out of the system. It's something that is very particular for Belgium, but in fact not only for Belgium, but also for other countries in the northern part of Europe, like the Netherlands and some countries in Scandinavia. Well, today, I would have hoped to welcome all of you in Brussels. And this is not possible And I would have hoped to welcome you in Brussels to learn you how to get in love with Brussels, because Brussels is not an easy city to love. On the other side, you know that love on the first sight is not always very durable. So it's not easy to love because it's a complex city. It's a difficult city. It's not Vienna. It's not a harmonious city. It's not a cute city. C'est pas une ville mignonne. That's amongst others because there has been in the past many laissez-faire urban planning. There has been many mistakes, brutal interventions in the city. And today, probably most of you know Brussels also from, for instance, European office quarter. Brussels is sometimes quite dull because we have a lot of offices. Really a lot of office buildings, mostly dating from the 60s, 70s, 80s. But exactly that very problematic point of Brussels, that annoying, dull point of Brussels, that is very crucial for today. Because we are living now in Brussels really a kind of shift, a paradigm shift. So before, the usual practice for renovating these urban areas would have been to demolish the office building and to build a new office building. For instance, because floor height has to be increased with something like 10 centimeters. And because of that very, in fact, small scale standards, you had to demolish the entire building and to start all over. So today we are changing that. I'm changing it in the way that I organize competitions, in the way I try to convince clients. Politicians are changing, social society is changing, but in fact, clients and architects are changing themselves as well. We know that we can't throw away a building anymore like we did before. We can't just throw it away like a paper tissue. So we have to reuse. And that's the interesting thing that is happening today in Brussels, that there is a lot of new building activity that is transforming buildings, that is reusing buildings, that is adapting and transforming them quite in a structural way, sometimes demolishing parts of it, but in fact, mostly not anymore demolishing it completely. This is changing our practice. So it's, for instance, diminishing also, you could say, the way that an architect is expressing its style. So also in the aesthetics, in the cultural way of our practice, things are changing. I think this paradigm shift is really, of course, it's really essential for our times. It's the paradigm shift in architecture and urban planning we have to do in order to respond to the challenges of climate change. That's clear. But I would also make another plea. I think it's difficult. Paradigm shift is always difficult, but it's also so much fun, in fact, and interesting, because architecture is about creativity. Architecture is about inventing new solutions. Architecture is about doing new things. And so that's why I think this difficult challenge in difficult times is in fact really alluring and seducing, because architecture is about creativity and that's what it should be. Thank you.
Stay a second. Can I have a question to you? Okay. Imagine Brussels 2050. You view into the crystal ball. In an ideal world, what do you see?
In an ideal world, I can see a business district like the Gare du Nord, or like the European Quarter, where half of the buildings, there will be people living in it. Because many of those transformations of buildings, it's also not just reusing the building and making it, giving it a new life, but also changing from offices to housing. So it's also an opportunity on another level, not on the level of architecture, but on the level of urban planning, to make more mixed neighborhoods, to have a more lively city.
Okay.
So it will be fun to live in the Gare du Nord area.
Meet you in 2050. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Christiane. Now is the moment for our first technical interruption via Slido. I very much invite you to use Slido now and activate it, slido.com234, or using your smartphones via the QR code. And we first want to create a word cloud with all of you together. Please describe in maximum 2 words, what is your current profession or occupation? Maximum 2 words, what is your current occupation? So I would probably say facilitator, so whatever it is. It takes some time to connect the dots, and we are collecting your answers, and we will share the outcome with you as soon as we get some input, because it's very interesting for us to know, are the engineers with us, landscape architects, designers, maybe also people from the graphic design sector or any other sector, housing, maybe any kind of social crafts, handcrafts, so whatever, teaching. Okay, we have policy, professor, performer, legal advisor, Hausmeister. Oh, that's nice. Okay, what else do we have? Can we go down with the architect and policy making? A rammed earth specialist. Oh yeah. Heritage specialist. What else do we have? Architect and multimedia. So Department of Architecture, consultant, director Elia, very warm welcome also. Legal advisor. So we have kind of a lot of architects. Hausmeister, policy offer, EU affairs, okay, administration and policy making, materials engineer, senior consultant. Okay, you see, we have quite a variety. Solar designer also, international relations manager. Okay, thank you very much. We will collect that in our archive. And we come to the next questions. We want to know from you, we are asking about the compactness of the built environment. How would you assess the density of the city or region that you live in? So number 1 is very low density, and number 10 is very high density of the place you're living in. So it's, no, not number 10, number 5. How would you judge that? How would you assess the density? Okay, 5 people answering, 8. Yeah, still. Oh, changing, middle. Okay, not so many people are living in low density areas. Okay, but not all. I'm coming from Berlin, so. Of course, and I want to contradict you in a way, Kristiaan. I totally, and really, I'm coming from Rome. I've spent some time in southern Italy, and I'm coming from Rome now. I came to Châtelain. I've never been to Châtelain. I immediately fell in love, immediately. It didn't even take 2 minutes. I went to the marketplace there. I was highly, so just to say, it was not difficult to fall in love with Brussels. Okay, thank you very much for this interaction. We will come back with other interactions through the day. And please now, I'm very much inviting you to share your questions in the chat to our next dear speaker. She's the winner of the 2021 New European Bauhaus Award in the category Solutions for the Co-Evolution of Built Environment Nature. It's Anna Heringer, and the signature of Anna Heringer, and that bridges to what we already heard, is architecture is a tool to improve lives, to strengthen cultural and individual confidence, to support local economies, and to foster the ecological balance. She's an architect and honorary professor of the UNESCO Chair of Earth and Architecture, Building Cultures and Sustainable Development, and she's focusing very much on using natural building materials. She has been actively involved in the development cooperation in Bangladesh for almost 25 years, and I could say many more things about her, but I leave the stage now to her for the next 20 minutes, and then we have 10 minutes time, hopefully, for your questions, and also from all of you in the room through the chat. Thank you very much. Anna Heringer, digitally connected with us. We are so honored.
Yeah, thank you for the wonderful introduction. Yes, you said it already. Architecture is a tool to improve lives. That's what I firmly believe in. Of course,
yeah, you are muted.
I'm muted.
Wait, we're trying to you're still muted. We try it. Give it another go.
On my screen, I'm unmuted.
Still. We see you beautifully, but you can hear us. It seems to be the mic. I can hear Anna. You can hear you. We can't hear you in the room. So dear technicians, can we check that? Unmute start video. No, here you see, unmute. No, we don't hear you yet. Okay, you can all hear Anna on Zoom. Can we do anything? We are trying. Okay, our dear team is trying. We are working on it. The people on Zoom can hear her. If you use your headphones, would that be a possibility through the translators? We just improvise now. These are the challenges of hybrid conferences. Dear Anna, sorry to interrupt you. Can you say something again?
Hello.
Yeah, fantastic. We're connected. Okay, big applause to our team. Great.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the technical support. Yeah, architecture is a tool to improve lives. I really firmly believe in that. Unfortunately, also the opposite is true. Architecture can destroy, and we have an enormous responsibility. We're built with really lots of resources. We're built with lots of money, also public money, so we really have responsibility. But I'm an idealist. I think we as profession, we can do better than we do now. I believe we can build not just a building, but at the same time also build up a community, and we can do this in harmony with nature. So what you see here is a study trip. It was the end of October, so around this time with ETH Zurich students. And together with Martin Rauch, with whom I was teaching, we decided that we surprised the group with the news that we haven't booked any hotel or any sort of accommodation for the night. And the challenge was to build a home or a shelter with whatever you could find for this night. And it was really cold. The results were not really luxurious, but it was a great learning experience, that there are a lot of resources given by nature for free, and all we need is our sensitivity to see those resources and our creativity to use them. And I found myself in a similar situation when I was 19 years old. I went to a remote Bangladeshi village called Rodopur with the aim to find out, how to make the best out of existing resources. That's what I learned there from the NGO Dipshika, that was my host organization. And I found out, that the most effective strategy for resilience and for development is always to really cherish the resources that you find and not trying to get depending on the external factors. Really make the best out of what you find. And that was what I was trying to transmit or put into architecture 7 years later with the Maître school. In terms of materials, I didn't have to look far. They were right under my feet: the dirt, the mud, the earth, and the bamboo that was growing all around the village. And in terms of energy resources, there were people. When we think of energy, we think of solar, we think of winds and water and so on. But we as human beings, we are all also a source of energy. And we are almost 8 billion. So we are a growing source of energy. And I really think we also because we also need work, or otherwise we create a social problem as well. So for me, the most important energy form for construction is craftsmanship, is people. So here you see the site. We had water buffaloes and cows as the mixing machine. It was completely off-grid without any electricity. And this was the school after 6 months of construction. I had a realization partner for this, APUR, because it was my diploma project. The school was really built out of solid earth walls on the ground floor and then a light bamboo structure on the top floor. And we kept the tradition in the rural areas to sit on the ground. And through this bolt hole that you see in the wall, you come to the caves areas. I was just trying to remember the spaces that I loved when I was a kid. I really try always to address very archaic patterns, very archaic needs as well. And I think we all can relate to that kind of spaces. And then the opposite is the tree house in the top floor. That brings kind of, the lightness in, the overview and the easiness. The children also signed with their names on the doors, and they rightfully signed because they also helped building the school. And of course, you cannot do this on every site and not with every material. But mud is an extremely inclusive material. You can shape it only with your hands. You don't need sophisticated tools that can harm you. It's not a toxic material. It's wonderful to touch. And I believe you can all imagine how it feels when you're standing as a young girl, as a young boy, after 6 months in front of this construction, and hey, I did this with only using my hand and the dirt beneath my feet. That just gives such an enormous boost in confidence in yourself, in your own potentials, but also in the group, in the team, and of course in the local materials, which is very important because mud and bamboo, but especially mud, has really a bad image being non-durable, which is not true, because actually these walls are withstanding the rainy season, horizontal monsoon rain since many years, and the walls are standing strong. There is no cement added, only in the foundation. And for me, the mud is the most fascinating material because it's the only material you can take from the ground, recycle as often as you want without downcycling, without any loss of quality. And you can return it to the ground it came from and plant the garden on top. So for me, this is really makes it a champion in terms of sustainable building materials. And it's also beautiful. In terms of economic sustainability, it was interesting for me that I could also, of course, I lived in the village, and in the evening when the workers got their daily wages, their salary, so their share of building budget, went together to the local market, and I could see how they spent their share of building budget. And it was directly invested in the local economy. They would buy the vegetables from the farmers, from the next door neighbor, or get a new sari blouse, bicycle repaired, and so on. So for me, the building budget did not just have a school as a result, but it was also a catalyst for local development. And that made me mostly happy, because if I had built that school with other materials such as concrete or steel, that money would have been lost for the community. So for me, when it comes to economic sustainability, the most important question always is, who gets the profit? Like, cui bono? And for me, you know, in the end of my career or at the end of my life, when I'm summing up all the different building budgets and hopefully come to a solid amount of money, I want to be able to tell myself, you know, that I've supported people, I supported craftspeople, and not just, you know, making the rich more rich. And I think, you know, architecture is dealing with a lot of money, and yes, we can contribute to social justice. The last building that I built a number of buildings in that particular village, but I also built just 2 years ago a center for people with disabilities, and also a new form of textile production unit. So unlike the first buildings that were very straight and precise, this building is breaking out of the mold, and precisely because it's for building for people with disabilities. And I wanted to show that there's a beauty in diversity. It's beautiful that we are all different in a way. So this is the elevation. This is how it is standing right now. And tomorrow I'll be there. I'm super excited to go back. And when you approach the building, you actually see a large ramp winding up all around the building. And it's the first thing that you see, and the first thing people ask when they approach the building: why do we need a ramp? And then you're immediately at the discussion on inclusivity and why it is important to have universal access and so on. So for me, this is also a powerful issue on architecture, or talent of architecture. Then it can make things that are invisible visible, like visions, like approaches and philosophies. And it can also shed the light on things that are usually overseen. So people with disabilities in Bangladesh are overlooked. And in that case, they are put right in the center, and the architecture is also expressing that. These are the therapy rooms at the ground floor, and the caves underneath that are differently than at the Maître school. They're much more, you know, you can glide from the ground, you can move your body. It's a bit more difficult to move your body in, so it's also part of therapy, you know, physical therapy, to build up the muscles and so on. So here you see the ramp, all in bamboo and mud, and the veranda in the top floor. And this is the place of Dept textiles, where we produce like fair trade fashion and textiles, but we also document our own projects in that area. And here they documented the village, Rudapur itself. And what you see here, for me, this is really a wonderful example of sustainable living. The blue dots, for example, are not just the fishing ponds, but they're also the excavation sources for the soil, for the mud, where the houses are being built with. The dark green dots are the bamboo plantations, you know, the almende areas where you get the building materials also for the houses. Then, of course, you have all the food cultivation all around, the paddy fields, the house gardens. The paddy fields were also the straw from for the houses comes from. So there is really a very closed circle of materials and material flows, and that makes it utterly sustainable. And I think there's something to learn with. Yeah, no matter if I'm working in textiles or architecture or anything else, I'm always trying to follow the approach: local materials plus local energy sources, especially craftsmanship, plus global knowledge. I think the information, the knowledge should really be accessible everywhere and should not be limited to a specific place, but the information should always be applied to the local condition and try, you know, to trigger new forms of creativity. So how do I do this in the context of Europe? This is a project I did with Martin Rauch, who is also a keynote speaker today. Yeah, this was, for example, Omicron Electronics, and we wanted to apply the most simplest building technique that is probably existing, taking wet mud and shaping it only by hand without any sort of formwork. But we wanted to do it in a two-story way. Martin is always looking for some new challenges and innovations. So we did the whole structure in a two-story way. And the idea behind, yeah, well, it should be already 8 billion. So I'm always, you know, when I'm designing, I'm always having this in my mind. I'm trying to multiply every design decision, every use of material. I'm trying to multiply by the number of people we have on this planet. You know, the world is not changing with one big decision. The world is changing by every one of us taking everyday decisions. And, you know, it's maybe just one paint or one glue that is just very small. But if everyone is taking that, or, you know, taking the lots of steel or overdoses of cement, if everyone is doing that, our planet would look really problematic. So, you know, even if it's maybe just a small scale, this decision, but if it was multiplied by many, it becomes a problem. So I'm really trying to design in a way that everyone could do it the same way and would not destroy our planet. So this is how this construction looked like, and this is how the building in the end looks like. It's very intimate spaces, power nap niches and so on for the company employees to hang out, to recharge the batteries, to discuss in a different space, to trigger maybe new ideas. And this is the focus on bamboo, but it's also earth and stone inside the households for the Bamboo Biennale in Bouwmeester, a small village in China. And with that project, I also wanted to show, you know, it's not a matter how old materials are, you know, they don't have to look old. It's a matter of our creative ability to use old materials in a new way, in a way that it meets our needs and aspirations. And of course, fibers are equally extremely important. A kindergarten in Zimbabwe for a permaculture project. There is surprisingly a lot of timber in Zimbabwe, so we built up the structure in timber. Yeah, of course, lots of participation also here, and then covered these structures, these beehive structures with lots of straw, also to improve the roofing techniques in that area. And this is how I'm building in Germany. This is the building that got the new European Bauhaus Awards. It was designed together with Martin Rauch. It's a health center in Rosenheim, and it's placed in an alluvial forest. So we have a load-bearing timber structure, a willow facade from my cousin who is from that place and who is a basket weaver. And of course, earth in manifold ways, also in forms of prefabrication here. So it's a combination of high tech and low tech. And the aim was also to create some sort of happy frugality in a way, you know, we always think, you know, when it comes to life quality, we have to combine this with lots of square meters, but it's not a matter of quantity. It's really a matter of quality, and quality is a lot linked to healthy building materials and to a refined craftsmanship. You know, when every surface is kind of, you feel the energy that is in that thing, you know, if it's crafted, and then you don't need much space, you know, you can live in very small spaces and feel like really embraced, and there's an intensity that is really, yeah, creating a big comfort also. And of course, also from a health aspect, earth is wonderful because it balances the indoor humidity perfectly, and it creates a very healthy interior. So for me, building with natural building materials is essential, not just, you know, in everywhere around the world. And I think it's a very powerful approach to tackle two of our biggest challenges that we currently face, which are the climate change and also social injustice. Working with local materials and natural materials usually implies a high input of human labor. And that makes it, unfortunately, very expensive to work with in our part of the world, in the European part of the world. But it's not the problem of earth, which is the building material of the poor, or or timber or of fibers. It's the problem of our economic system, because we have a very low tax on carbon emissions or energy from fossil fuels, but we have very high taxes on human labor. And there's an imbalance, and we really need to find new forms, of frameworks, of economic frameworks. And the good news is, of course, that our economics is not a force of nature, it's man-made. So we also really can change it, and we have to. And I really believe that we have to include and increase a CO2 tax very soon to really enable sustainable building, because right now it's financially problematic if you want to build sustainable. It's always the more expensive solution, and that should not be the case. I'm also building right now a project in Ghana, and it's an educational campus. And what you see on your left side is the master plan that we got from Ghana, from a Ghanaian architect. But of course, it has a lot of European history in it. That's how missionary times and colonial times things have been built, and you see on the other side, you see still the reality, which is very harmonious, is very rhythmic and everything, but it's not implemented anymore in from organizations that are coming from outside. So we really need to review our heritage, our European heritage in those countries too, and do something to foster traditional know-how and enhance it and bring it also in the future. So I literally twisted this master plan, brought in the vernacular shapes again, so it's a lot of schools and hostels for students to stay in. We're currently looking for funds for a school for sustainable construction. So if anyone knows about any funds, I'd be happy to know. So this large building is going to be the next one. The one I'm working right now is already standing there. And this is how it looks on site. Katharina Kohlrose, my manager, we have a 100% woman quota in our office. And this is how the walls are growing. Yes, I'm really very much advocating for less concrete, more earth. I really think we have to reintroduce this beautiful material, which is really ultimately needed for future sustainable constructions. Last project I want to show also with Martin Rauch, it was a competition for a new altar. The Worms, the cathedral in Worms had its 1,000-year-old birthday. So the community wanted to give, for this special occasion, something to the cathedral, and there was always a temporary altar, and they wanted to give them a new one, a fixed one. And our idea was not to bring in the ready-made object, but to bring in the tools, the material, and then the community comes together and rams this altar. The earth, the kind of also is the basis of the bread, and also the basis of the wine, of course. So it makes a lot of meaning on this place. We also brought in historic elements like from the Roman Empire, some stones, and from many parts of the history, the rich history in Worms. But then also people started to bring in personal items like letters and necklaces and postcards and songbooks and so on, and the best wine in the region and honey. And the children brought pink glitter in, which was not, the priest was a bit stressed that the altar would glitter in pink in the end, but it did not. Everyone was participating, from the choir, from altar boys and girls and nuns. And in the end, you could see how this was really a powerful element to foster the community and the team spirit. And one of the women told me afterwards, usually we're not that harmonious, but we had to pull in one direction. We had to stick together to accomplish this aim. And this is what's missing, I think, in our parts of the society now. In the past, it was a common practice to come together to build a cathedral, a city hall, a school, or help each other, to build our own houses, their own houses. But this is not happening anymore. But this act of building is really, the process of building is so much in fostering community. And, for me, the process is just as important as the outcome. And we have to design the process as much as we have to design the outcome, because there's really a powerful element to build not just a structure, but also to build up a community. And this picture is for me very much, reflecting our society in a way, with all the gold in the background. We are not lacking materiality. we are lacking good relationships. And this is what architecture can also do. And we can't build up a building and a society and a fair and a good community at the same time. So the question is always form follows what? I think form follows function is not enough anymore. We have much more complex issues to solve with architecture. And I think, you know, there's a lot of functional buildings around. There's also a lot of good looking buildings around, but what we really need are meaningful buildings and also truly beautiful buildings. And what is beauty? It's always a big question, but for me, beauty is a formal expression of love. And if we do things out of love towards the others, towards the planet, we naturally do it also sustainable. So for me, it would be form follows love. Thank you very much.
Anna. Thank you so very much, Anna. People are totally in love with your presentation. They didn't send any questions. They've been amazed by your inspirations. So I might start with my first questions, but please, I embrace your questions. Please send them through the chat and I will ask them. Here's my computer. I follow your thoughts. I would like to come back to policy making. You talked about the CO2 price, that you think it's absolutely key. What other policy making principles or regulation tools do you think are key in order to change building and construction?
Yeah, it's very difficult actually to build with non-standardized materials. You know, I mean, it was in the past, after the First World War and after the Second World War, there have been 45,000 buildings built out of mud in a very short time. But nowadays it becomes so difficult to build with earth. In Germany, you need special, you need special testings that are expensive, which you would not have to pay, when you build with a normal material like concrete, for example. These are all additional costs that makes it difficult. And then, of course, we have created a mountain, a pile of building regulations where I have the feeling a lot of are obsolete, a lot of are not in favor of sustainability anymore, and also not in favor of innovation. And I think we should really look carefully at all the regulations and norms and really ask the question again, cui bono, who gets the profit? Whom does it make happy? The building lobby? Or is it people, and is it the planet who is for it? So I would really like to have a close look on all the regulations and really look at with this filter, of sustainability. And we are so triggered by fear, and of course, and eliminating risk, but we cannot ultimately eliminate any sort of danger, and we always have to balance, what amount of resources are really needed for eliminating maybe a risk that is maybe not so important. But if we, follow this rule, then maybe we create a risk which is much more bigger than that, which is climate change. So I think really we have to look more closely on rules and regulations.
Thank you very much, Anna. There's a question coming through Slido. Pierre will forward that question to me on WhatsApp, that I get it. I have another question, or two questions. What are the biggest challenges in scaling with the material you work with? And secondly, how does the material age? So far as you can talk about it, because you didn't build with it for 100 years. I'm talking. I'm asking you about your experiences in aging. Yeah, the material.
Somehow my camera is not working. Sorry.
Nice.
But there will be another keynote speech which will explain those things in more detail. But yes, we have a building history in Europe. We're just having kind of a cultural blackout when it comes to earth and structures. But we have a large building history, and even at the Champs-Élysées there have been buildings made out of rammed earth in Paris. So there is a large building history, but this aspect I think Martin Rauch will explain much more in detail today. It's when clay walls, it's like if you consider a hill that has no rocks, no trees, and the water can run down in a high speed over the hill, then you have a fast erosion and you have the topic of erosion. But if you manage to slow down the speed of the water, through kind of speed breakers on the facade and through a good mix, then the water doesn't have the power of erosion, you know, on the facade. And clay can deal with humidity very well because it just, you know, expands, it closes all the cracks, the water cannot penetrate deep in the wall, and it dries out very fast. So it's also really in our climate zones a durable material. I mean, if you build the Bangladesh in the monsoon season or monsoon times,
absolutely.
then it's also possible.
Absolutely. So now the first questions are popping in. Could you tell us a bit more in detail? I just got the first part of the question about the design process in India. Oh, the computer is doing what he wants, but still we have you on sound, which is very important. So, yeah. So the design process in India, could you tell us a bit more about the design process in India? And so maybe that as a start.
Yeah, people think, you know, it's always important to have in the participation process the users, you know, super actively involved. I put the participation process, the focus in the process. You know, it was my diploma project, for example, so I could not really, and I was doing this thing in Austria, so I could not really include the children. And I also think that 7, 8, 12-year-old children cannot design a school. That's the responsibility of the architect. But what is our responsibility as planners is really to closely observe children, to really understand their needs. And you can also do this in remembering your own spaces that you loved when you were a kid. That's what I did. And then, of course, during the construction process, you know, I'm not a control freak. And I think, you know, that's a tendency in architecture that we love to control things. But control is kind of disabling participation. So for me, you know, the building process, I'm opening up options, you know, and then, you know, I see, you know, it's like, you know, a conductor that sees, you know, oh, there are good craftsmen, you know, solace, you can step back a bit and give them space to express themselves. And then, you know, you step in again as a conductor and keep the threads together. And that's more like the way I love to do participation.
We have a place for 2 more questions. There's another question coming in about the rammed earth use in relation to earthquakes.
Yeah,
Do you have
just as any other material, we have to reinforce it. I mean, there have been buildings built in Basel, for example, which is a high-risk zone. And yes, you can do hybrids, of course, but you can also reinforce it just as concrete. You need to reinforce. You can also reinforce earthen structures. So you can do it with different materials. You can do it with timber, bamboo. You can also use geogrid. You can also use, of course, steel. It's all possible.
And I have a last question. I tried to bring it together because it was split in 2 parts. So there's somebody who gets a lot of how to overcome the post-colonial mindset from your presentation. What else can we do as architects to help to change that is the question. So it's about mindset change. And I think this is a question coming back to Europe.
When you come from outside, you can also put the focus on things, you know, if you're living in something you see every day, those vernacular structures, you take it for granted, you don't see the beauty in that. But if you come from outside and you're excited about these structures and you're admiring the structures, of course, this has an effect there. And if you start, you know, getting inspired by them and including it in a kind of new form of architecture, and then suddenly, you know, it has always the scene when you come, it's kind of a European design, but hey, it looks African or it looks, you know, vernacular. It has an effect. And of course, it did it in the past as well. They came with, you know, more industrialized materials. They came also with this kind of grid layout of a master plan, which is not at all, you know, an indigenous form of building. And I'm just testing it, but I know it from Bangladesh that people, you know, suddenly switched, you know, the perception also, you know, saying, you know, it's actually a modern material too. It's not just an old material. And I think, you know, it gets back to the love again. You know, I think people feel if you love a culture and if you're, you know, really engaging with it, I think they feel it. And you're of course also a kind of a cultural ambassador when you're working in this kind of context, and you have to be very aware of that and very sensitive.
Thank you very much, Anna, also for answering all those questions, and thank you very much for being so loving as an ambassador for the material and the people you work with. Thank you very, very much, and I'm very much looking forward to having, and you already mentioned it, Martin Rauch, I think it's 13:30 this afternoon, it's right after lunch, to have him as another keynote speaker. All the best to Bangladesh. I think you fly tomorrow. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. Thank you very much. And we are now entering our first group session. It's about 60 to 70 minutes, all in all. It's totally virtual. And we are now highlighting the importance of the design stage, of mindsets and attitudes, we have already been talking about that, towards the built environment, and of addressing the challenges at various scales. So from very small to very big scale. Each of our fellow speakers has 10 minutes of presentation, and there will be always Q&A moments with your questions on site and online through the chat. Please, for the questions, otherwise I get a bit confused. Don't use the Slido tool, although they also have a Q&A tool. Please only go through the chat, because otherwise I can't check both columns at the same time. So all your questions, please only put them in the normal chat on Zoom. If you go much over time, dear speakers, I will make myself hearable after 10 minutes. I will start to sing or do anything else terribly. So we start with, and I'm very happy now to hand over the stage to Steffi SCHÜPPEL. She's landscape architect. She's a member of AIAPP Italy, and she's a chair of BDLA Saxony, which is a German landscape architecture association in Saxony. So yeah. You have the start, dear Steffi. I hope you are there.
Yes, I am.
Great.
Hello, everybody, also from my side. I'm joining you from Dresden, Saxony. And after this very inspiring lecture of Anna, I would like to draw your attention more to the open space, as I am speaking to you also as a representative for IFLA Europe. I would like to exploit a bit also the role of landscape architects in this topic of the built environment and climate change. So I'm sharing now my presentation. I hope that this works. Okay. I hope you can see that. The project that I would like to present to you today has grown steadily throughout this duration. It began with an idea to bring the topic of climate change and the role of landscape architects in this context closer to the general public, and to use concrete projects to show in how many ways actually we can take the topic of climate change into account in our planning, and how many measures can be used in the most diverse ways to help to counter climate change and its consequences, and to simply should make our living environment resilient and to protect the climate. And when this idea came up and we approached the future project partners, it was actually preaching to converted. They all had an open ear to that topic, and we immediately, they were immediately willing to participate in the project. So this is Germany, just to make you understand where we are. This is Saxony, and in Saxony there is Dresden. The location that we chose for the exhibition is called Zentrum für Baukultur. It's the Center for Building Culture of Saxony, which is located in Dresden. And it's a place for dialogue on current issues of urban development and architecture. And it's an institution of the Foundation of Saxon Architects, was founded in 2017. And basically, it aims to promote an understanding of the design of buildings and public spaces, and to highlight the importance of the everyday life to every person. So it's really aiming at the general public. And in addition to the architectural heritage, the interested public is to be made more familiar with the current trends also in architecture and urban development. And so this is done by many means, like discussions, lectures, readings, films, and also exhibitions. So we started with this exhibition, which is called, we chose as a title Prima Klima, This is landscape architecture. Das ist Landschaftsarchitektur. This exhibition was done in 2019. And a bit about this, the context of it. The increasing building density contributes to the warming of the inner cities. We can also see that very well in Dresden in summer, and it makes the ventilation of cities more difficult, as all of us know. There is an increasing lack of areas which heat up less and where the rainwater can seep away. So all these sustainability and climate aspects must therefore be integrated in our planning. And the recent heat and drought phenomena also require new ways of thinking. I think that we agree on that. And landscape architecture actually deals precisely with that problem. And we already know some solutions which can help the cities to keep them as livable spaces for the people. So there is no single measure that you can apply to meet all the challenges, but there are many, many different ways which can help our cities make them cooler and more shady and more green. To raise awareness of these measures, this exhibition Prima Klima, that's landscape architecture, was initiated in 2019, and it's a joint project of the Federation of German Landscape Architects, the regional group of Saxony, the Saxony Chamber of Architects, the city of Dresden, and the Technical University of Dresden. And this exhibition included 20 projects in 7 categories. I will just introduce you quickly to them. For example, we had projects of urban transformation. So there are examples from Duisburg, for example, urban redevelopment of a city, conversion of a residential area to a people's park. Or on the right side, you see an example from Dresden, which basically converted a parking space into a green oasis in the center of the city. Or we had projects which were dealing with sustainable housing. So there were projects which show how you can actually use the green on also underground car parks, and how to integrate the green also on all levels in the project, like on green facades and green roofs. Another important topic was reuse. Certainly all of us are a bit familiar with the reusing materials, but we also have had a project which shows how to reuse old trees. In this particular case, there were found also protected species of bugs in the trunks. So in this project, it was decided not to cut them down, they were replanted. And actually now they're standing even more beautiful than before. On the right side is this example for reusing materials. This also with a special relation to the history of the place, because this park was built on the area of a former factory which produced panels for panel houses and concrete pieces. So they were reused. Another important matter was mobility. Here on the left side, you see a concept which was made by the university. So we also integrated student projects in this exhibition. And on the right side, is this example of this so-called mobility points, the example of the city of Dresden, where all the alternative travel offers were combined in points so the users could choose there. We had projects of renaturalization, sort of classic examples of bringing out the water from the pipe, renaturating water streams, and with different functions for also flood protection, for recreation, or for connection in the quarters. We had projects of revitalization. This was the project on the left side is a natural public pool. It's actually a historic pool in the city of Dresden, which was abandoned and was falling apart. So there was a citizens' initiative which decided to bring that back to life, and it is now a really, really beautiful project. This was actually not included in the exhibition. It was it was included in the supporting program that I will speak about a little later. And on the right side, another example of revitalization of a floodplain, which was a former industrial area actually. And the last category we called Urban Climate. And there we included, for example, a research project where the city of Dresden was also participating in, which is called Heat Resilient Cities, where the issues of the overheated cities and how it influences the life of people was a big issue. And actually already in 2017, the city of Dresden made a survey in between the citizens. And the questions were like, is climate change happening also in Dresden? Is heat stress an issue for the citizens? And which precaution measures would make sense according to you? So already in 2017, the citizens were asked about these important matters, and this is an important basis of argumentation also for the implementation of the adaptation measures to climate change in this growing city. And as I mentioned before, we had also a very large supporting program surrounding the exhibition. In these 4 weeks, there were movie nights, for example, which on the left side, you see this Zentrum für Baukultur. It's actually a very small location, but it was kind of always packed with people. So that was making us happy. And we had public panel discussions where people were also very interested. And there was this tradition to always do tours on the National Day of Architecture. Usually we had tours with a bus to bring people around to projects. This time we decided to have a bicycle tour, and we included that also in the supporting program. There was a symposium with more than 100 people. It was sold out and very requested. There were guided tours, garden walks in the city. In the same context, there was also a meeting of the mayor of the city of Dresden, which was meeting with the representatives of Fridays for Future. And after their discussion, they came to our exhibition to see that. There was a Citizens Festival, which actually at the end was not such a big success because it was one of these days in which there were 35 degrees outside. And actually the comment was at the end, you see in this condition of the heat, people don't want to go to the center of the city because there's no shade, it's too hot. So that already in that context, we could see the effects of this. And it ended with the finissage, and as the concept of the exhibition was the one of a traveling exhibition, it was also then brought to other places. We received a lot of feedback on this exhibition. There were entries in the guest book of the Center of Building Culture, or there were posters made together with the visitors. And this on the right side, you see the collection of ideas which came from this panel discussion. And unfortunately, it was for us not possible to determine the number of visitors for the exhibition, but the statement of the former director of the Center for Building Culture was that no exhibition has ever worked well than that as this one. So we were very happy about that. And it had also reactions and feedback on other levels. Right in that time, also Dresden was calling for ideas in a competition for roof and facade greening. Then in Leipzig, there was a project which is called Leipziger Blau-Grün, which is dealing with the blue-green infrastructure. And also there was an exchange of ideas and new impulse giving to the project. There were from there started also professional exchange regarding urban development in green infrastructure between the BDLA, so our Federation of Landscape Architects, and the Dresden municipality, which we are very happy about. And around the same time, also our national association, so on national level, launched a campaign which is called Wir gestalten Klima, so we design climate, which actually shows also what landscape architects can do in this context. And we are also very happy about new collaboration on new projects between the BDLA, the Saxony Chamber of Architects, and the Dresden municipality, which one of them it's called Forum Stadtgrün, so green in the city, which is an event which is now happening in actually in 10
20 seconds. 20 seconds, dear Steffi.
One last thing, we also put everything in a documentation. So in this documentation, there are the projects from the exhibition, the impressions and information from the supporting program. And we were happy to have 2,000 copies printed, 9,000 clicks, 2,500 downloads. So we had also very good feedback on that. And people are using that also as a tool for argumentation. So looking back, we can say in good conscience that we succeeded in actually what we set out to do. And in some areas, our expectations were even succeeded. And in addition, a network has been formed and strengthened throughout this project. And since then, the actors in this field have been actively talking to each other and initiating further projects. And we would be very happy if we could inspire people with our work to launch similar projects. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Steffi. Room for your questions. And I learned, I totally forgot it to also say it, for the on-site people, you can of course use your microphones. They are very visible in the room. I forgot that. Please, you can not only use the chat, but also make yourself visible through the hand. And I will take your question into account, of course. As long as I don't get your questions via chat or here, I start, Steffi. First question I have, as I said, I come from Berlin. In Berlin, soil is parts of the city are extremely expensive and they get more expensive more and more. So I think the fight between building buildings or giving place to nature becomes even worse. Do you think that the health conditions of climate change, which are urgently becoming worse, heat stress, etc., are a kind of enabler for your work? So that the paradox is, the worse it gets outside, the more space for your work. Is that a kind of the slope you expect to go?
Well, certainly there's more attention to projects in open space, and more money also goes in that direction.
Yeah, more money.
Another important factor has been the pandemic. We now have been experiencing how important the open spaces are for each of us. So this is not just about the big public parks in the center of the city. This is also small green spaces in our neighborhoods. And I think, yes, there's more attention and people understand more about our work, I must say. And I hope I hope that we are going in that direction.
I would like to bridge to the last speech of Anna Heringer. She said two things. The one thing is what I think is very interesting. Think about where the resources go, because cui bono, that was the one thing she said. And the other thing is like working with the hands, putting your hands in the mud, and this very inspiring work of her. How much do you work with people, not only bring them to the sites and inform them, but rather let them really create gardens or spaces or pools or anything like that? So is this co-creation with handcrafts a model you will implement in the future a lot, or do you think about that?
Well,
with communities? Yeah.
Yes, we are already doing that. There are projects which are involving the public. Then obviously one thing that we always do, we in our practice, and also I know from many other colleagues, that we speak with the future users, and of course we hear what they need, and we take that into account, or actually make that a basis for our projects. In then putting the hands in the mud and actually constructing themselves, yes, that is also possible. There are also, to be honest, some issues of safety and etc. to be considered when you do projects in Germany. That is always a big deal, let's say. I imagine that regulations in Bangladesh might be a bit different in that context. I would be interested to hear what Anna says about that. But we, yes, we try to do that wherever is possible and wherever people are willing to join.
I have a last question from our dear audience. Somebody's asking, in cities with expansive housing, people are most concerned with housing, which might lead to more and more ceiling. How can we reach out to private owners of all scale to rebuild and mobilize buildings that are already there, or densify in a sensible way instead of simply build new houses and lose out on the green?
That's a very good question.
Yeah, big question.
Well, actually, I don't really have an answer to this, but I think it would be the choice to reuse what is already there. And if then we also have to provide spaces in open space which fulfill certain functions and have to fulfill certain requirements. Anyway, we tend to try not to seal the soil, and we try to build in the most sustainable way. And in the brochure that I mentioned in our project, we actually have this agenda of landscape architecture with checklists how to build in a sustainable way. Like exactly those are also the suggestions, not to seal the soil, not to reuse the building material, like all these aspects that I also mentioned when introducing the project. So who wants to get more information, please click on the link, which will be also then available, and you find some more information there, what can be done.
And a very last question, in policy making, what do you think, and in regulation, what do you think? Oh, no, I have another question. Financial incentives might be the answer to this. Money is such an important driver in our society. Coming to the very last question, policy making, regulation, what do you think, from a German perspective, must change in order to foster your work?
I think that one idea that we also expressed after working on this topic now is that planning processes which are not respecting these criteria, like for example, they are not dealing with soil in a sustainable way, or they're not reusing material wherever possible. They're like wasting great energy by using exclusively new building material, which comes from far, and all these aspects that involve that those should not be able to receive permissions anymore. I think in the process of giving building permissions this applies to buildings, but also to open spaces. I think there should be new criteria which also integrate a lot more the matters of sustainability, and projects which are not sustainable, they should just simply not get the permission anymore.
So we will talk about, and also the topic of procurement, we will talk to our EU policy session later this day. Steffi, thank you very much. All the best to Saxonia and your work. And we now switch to Christiane Blanco. She's also online. She's architect by profession, directrice d'études villes et formes urbaines chez Atelier Parisien d'Urbanisme, APUR. She will talk in French. So if you don't want to follow in French, please in the room use your headphones. And if you are on Zoom, you can click the button to change the language and it will be translated into English. So I now leave the floor for the next 10 minutes for Christiane. And after 10 minutes, I will make myself visible. Christiane, the floor is yours.
Bonjour.
Bonjour. Ah, super. Ça marche.
Hello. I don't know if you hear me. I think you have my presentation, so you should launch this on the screen. Yes, it is starting right now. Excuse me, but the microphone is really not sounding very well. But I'm Christiane Blanco. I'm an architect and head of studies in the Atelier Parisien d'Urbanisme, which is the center which is in charge of studies about Paris, Grand Paris. So we have a rather large scope. So I will maybe discuss the city more than architecture. We started to work with the city of Paris in order to prepare a revision of the local plan for the city. And it is something important in order to make Paris more resilient to climate than it is today. So maybe modify its carbon imprint or footprint and evolve towards less energy and more resilience towards climate change, and we try to take into account heat, of course, and its impact on the city, even if many other aspects are being taken into account. Now, a few elements about the context before we go to the next slide, just to tell you that Paris is 100 square kilometers and 2.2 million inhabitants, so very densely populated city, all the more so that on top of these 2 million inhabitants, you have more than 1 million people coming to work every day in Paris. So really densely populated, but also densely used. And I want to tell you also that only 10% of the building permits in Paris since the last 15 years, only 10% are for new buildings. All the rest is just to help to transform existing buildings. Sometimes also extensions, or you add a building to another building, things like that. But existing buildings are already being transformed in our city. And now we are preparing a new way of transforming the city in order to take the climate into account, because this city is already built now. There is no natural space anymore if you accept the two big forests or wood areas. So here you see very densely populated or built, more than the nearing territories, and the two woods, east and west. Paris has 5 square meters of green space per inhabitant. So very mineral city, very few green spaces, and that's what you can see also on the picture on the right. Next slide. This city is also at the center of a major agglomeration of more than 1,000 square kilometers. So Paris is a city of 100 square kilometers, over 100. I mean, but we have big parks also all around, but still it is densely built. And in the center of this agglomeration, Paris produces most greenhouse gases, which of course pollute and make the atmosphere hotter. Next slide. And so Paris produces, because it is so densely built and so mineral, level of heat which is very high. You can see it on the picture right. Compare this to the image left. In red, you have the buildings that use more than 80% of the surface of the ground they're built on. So you see, it is so dense, it's so mineral, that it produces a very high level of heat in the city. Not only due to buildings, I mean also, but when we had the heat wave in 2003, well, mortality was normally 500 people. We went to 3,000 people. So it was really something that shocked people about the idea that heat and the city can kill its inhabitants if we really produce so bad impact for its inhabitants. Next slide. If you zoom on the center of Paris, you see how the city fabric looks like. Another element about the context is that 70% of the buildings in Paris were built before 1914, which means that this city was built at a time when we were more bioclimatic. we built with wood, plaster, until the beginning of the 19th century. And it's only from after the war of 1418 that you are going to see new materials and new urban forms. So in fact, this city started using energy after 1945, but for buildings which had been designed sometimes 50 years or 100 years before, with a consumption which was much lower. So you see that this is a very important stake to change this fabric. You see here left areas that were built in the 60s are much less densely populated.
This is more or less the same thing. Yeah, this is a different look at the city. Next slide, please. Next. And here, what you can see here on the screen is the low presence of green spaces. You see only but a very few green spots where there are green spaces. This means that this is exactly what we're going to address next. Here you can see the kind of urban fabric that we're talking about. What is at stake is to refresh the city. For this, we need to enhance green spaces. We need to manage water differently so that we can use it and reuse it. And third, we need to transform the built environment so that it is less energy consuming and so that it brings more comfort to the local population in case of a heat wave. Next, talking about water, the objective here would be to transform the way water is managed. Next. The objective would be to reuse water, to store water. You can see here the survey that we conducted. We wanted to get a look at what was going on and where this could be done. And we realized that this is something that we could do everywhere in Paris and that we could disconnect rainwater from the public water system. Quite obviously, it would mean changes that need to be made at the plot level. Next. Second element, to give more room to green spaces, the objective being to take action on those spaces where there are no buildings. Here, you can see by yourselves a couple of examples of what we've started to do. You see here a number of open spaces that date back to the 19th century. What we've done is that we've really transformed these spaces so as to make it possible to plant trees. And this is what you get in small streets. Next. Your time's up. Your time is up. And finally, you can see here what we've done at the soil level. Very quickly, I'm going to skip the part dedicated to the transformation of the built environment. Next. You hear can see the different sketches that we made. You've got the Haussmann type of building or building dating back to the 60s and more modern buildings with a green roof. And you see here how they can be transformed so that they use less energy. And I will leave you with a couple of examples. These are biosourced buildings for which we've used biosourced materials, buildings where we used cut stones, even though cut stones had not been used for a very long time. And finally, we've got here the integration of a rainwater system. Thank you very much, and sorry if I exceeded my 10-minute speaking time. Thank you very much, Christiane. Can you hear? Can you hear the question in English? Yes. No problem. But I'd rather have people ask me questions in French. Could you please get a copy of your presentation? Great, thank you. Including images, yes. Second question. We will hear from other architects, one of them being Dirk van Peep, who's going to talk about the water question. Can architects make their voice heard in the way water is managed in Paris? Because the point is not only to refurbish buildings, but the question is also for them to take part in the water management discussion. I'm not sure that I understood your question. The objective in Paris would be to integrate water management in the project. It's
really looking for innovative solutions. Do the architects? Ah, ok. Je change la question. Il y a une autre question.
There is another question. There's the 15-minute city in Paris. Could you please tell us more about the 15-minute city? Are there links with what you do? Or are these two completely different strands? I'm here talking about the administration and the ministries. Do the two go hand in hand, or are they different? You're here to talk about the 15-minute city. Yes, exactly. Well, the 15-minute city is fully integrated into our local town planning. Obviously, this is something that is very important because the objective is to make it possible for people to no longer have to use their cars. The priority should be given to the softer mobility. I didn't really talk about mobility, but this certainly is something very important to be taken into consideration. But there are other aspects also, such as the need to reduce the presence of cars and make sure that there are less cars being present on the banks of the Seine River. And there is also the issue of alternative mobility. But we are very lucky insofar as the 15-minute city already exists in Paris. You've got shops everywhere. But we hear talking more at the level of the conurbation. This is where the issue is very important, simply because people don't have much of a choice. They have to use their car if they want to go shopping. Whereas in Paris, we can really say that there is already the 15-minute city. It already exists. And I would have a last question coming from the chat. What about your relationship with private owners? There's an agency that was created in Paris that works with the landowners. You probably know that that's particularly difficult to make the situation change. But there is a specific agency that has been created. It works with the different owners. The social landlords are ahead, really, of the co-owners and the owners, where I must say it is much more difficult. Thank you very much, Christiane. Thank you very much to Paris.
Gustaf LANDAHL. He's head of Department of Planning and Environment at the city of Stockholm. For 25 years, he's responsible for environmental control and environmental issues in land use planning. And I'm happy now, yeah, there you are. And we'll see you also in a minute. So happy to leave the stage for you.
Okay, thank you.
You're in the clouds.
Right, I'm in the clouds. Somewhere I don't see really my presentation now, but let's see.
We see it. We see it.
Okay, and now, okay. I'm going to talk a bit about how we work in Stockholm on mitigating the climate change in the built environment. And I'll give you some examples, and I'll try to stick to my 10 minutes. The examples are 5. First of all, I'll speak about how we put requirements on city-owned land, where we can do quite a lot. How certification has also become a major issue in also the private land and private buildings. How we've started to work with the life cycle analysis and embedded carbon in building materials, some examples on wooden buildings, and then retrofitting and renovation, which often is a bit forgotten, but is very important because that's where we have the big built environment, and give some examples from the Grow Smarter project. So that is what I'm going to speak about. Now, if we look at the city-owned land, here is a map over the municipality of Stockholm, and everything yellow and orange is owned by the city and the city building house and housing companies. So you see that in the city of Stockholm, due to a very foresighted policy in the turn of the previous century, we acquired very much land. And even if our requirements in our national building codes aren't, well, they're pretty good compared to some countries, but we want to go further. If you take, for example, energy, the national building codes are 80 kilowatt hours per square meter. That's including hot water, the building electricity, and heating. So you calculate it a bit different than many other countries because it includes the hot water. It should be, in national building code, it's 80. We require 55 kilowatt hours on the city-owned land. We also put in requirements to avoid chemical substances such as certain building materials like copper, which is toxic to water-living organisms. So we make sure that we don't build with copper, and also zinc is avoided. We have put in a green area factor for the ecosystem services. So for different, you can choose from a load of different things like green roofs, green walls, building more recreational facilities in the yards, and putting in more water handling systems for the rainwater. Now, for all of these different services, you get a certain number of points. The number of points are then divided by the area you build upon. And you have to reach a quote of 0.6 points per square meter. This gives those who are the developers and their architects and so a possibility to choose from different alternatives how to reach this factor. And that makes it interesting for them to be more creative, but still build in better ecosystem services in the new areas that are being constructed. That is on the city-owned land. We also started a green parking index. The National Building Code requires that we have sufficient parking for the flats which are built. But we now have found a way of saying that you can, instead of having like one parking lot for every 2 flats, we can instead make sure that they provide car sharing systems, additional parking for cycles, and different mobility solutions which sort of add up to making sure that the apartments have sufficient mobility systems. And thus we can move away from the normal way of calculating this with just the number of parking lots per flat. So this is also helping us to reduce the number of cars in these buildings. And of course, this makes sense for the developers as well, because a parking spot in a house, in like a basement, it's like 50,000 euro per space, so it's expensive as well. For the private developers, and especially for office space, certifications of buildings is almost something you have to have now, or you won't be able to get customers to rent these building spaces. So there's been a very quick development of the certification of buildings with different types of certification systems here in Sweden. We have introduced a new tool for calculating the life cycle assessment of buildings. You look at the materials going into the buildings and the constructions, and this is now being implemented in all new developments. And we see that the next step will be actually setting up normative goals for developing on city-owned land, thus taking into account the embedded carbon in developments. If you take an example here, you can compare 2 buildings we have in the city which have been developed quite recently. The Blå Jungfrun, which is very low on its operating energy. It's one of these that reach the 55 kilowatt hours per square meter goals. But still you can see that that development, if you take into account also the construction process, goes way higher than a new wooden developed building. So when we start now putting in requirements, we believe that maybe wood will be more oftenly used. But on the other hand, there is work being done now to bring down the fossil fuel in the creation of concrete, and thus bringing down the emissions from that as well. So all of this had to do with new developments. But then the big majority of buildings are the ones we already have. So to develop this, we worked in a common European funded project called Gross Maître, where we worked with Barcelona and Cologne and demonstrated 12 smart solutions how to even go further in bringing down the greenhouse gas emissions when renovating an existing area, taking into account both the buildings, the infrastructure in the area, and also transport, which is probably our largest challenge in bringing down our greenhouse gas emissions. In the project, we renovated some 130,000 square meters with reductions of bought energy by 76%. In some of the examples in Stockholm, a bit lower in some of the southern European projects where you don't need as much energy. We put in smart home systems, which at an average got the tenants to reduce their energy use by 15%. We put in a lot of smart electricity management issues to lower the peak demand, both by trying to use vehicle to grid, using the vehicles as batteries, which was difficult because there's only one vehicle manufacturer now guaranteeing their batteries if you do that. And there's also other issues like the legislation on electricity is not really adapted to that kind of use. So we pointed this out for the Commission to be worked with. We put in a lot of local energy production as well, but we did also point out to the Commission that we do in some countries have taxation issues which sort of are very restraining the use of solar power. If we look at the integrated infrastructures, we put in smart street lighting, which was for the cyclists and the pedestrians. The lights go up from 50% illumination through LED up to 100% when someone comes walking or cycling, and then it goes down to a lower illumination after they've passed. These are also connected through communication systems, so the maintenance people can find where there are broken lamps. They don't have to drive around having the lamps on all day trying to find broken ones. The lamps tell them where to go. This saved something like 31% of the electricity use. We introduced new business models for district heating and cooling. In a city, you have many like refrigerators, the grocery stores. You have also for all the computers and everything, or web halls, you have a lot of need for cooling. We introduced a new business model where you could sell actually the excess heat to the district heating system and get paid at the same rate as they were producing heating at that moment. And we also introduced combined cooling and heating systems in the southern European cities, such as especially Barcelona, to use the energy in a much more efficient way. We introduced smart waste collection, which is difficult in the existing buildings to have all the different fractions we want to have in a more circular economy. But we introduced different colored bags, which were then put into the same pneumatic waste collection system outside the house, exactly outside the house, so the tenants could put it in there. And these colored bags were then optically sorted and the different resources were reused. People liked this, so there was a reduction in residual waste by 66%, and actually traffic in the area, because of the use of pneumatic systems, reduced by 90% for the waste collection. And we had a lot of big data management as an enabler, but that was never the most interesting part. That was just an enabler. You have to go start with the needs that people have. We did a lot on the urban mobility as well. Many people buy goods through the web nowadays, and they drive away and collect these goods at different places. We introduced sustainable delivery through e-cargo bikes to the buildings, where they had put in a delivery room, so people received their goods in their own house and also could have the returns put into the same room, which had you got a code to get into this room in the system so no one took your stuff. And this this reduced very much the emissions from deliveries, and also became very interesting because the Nordic postal system is now interested in introducing this in a lot of other buildings as well. In the city also, construction material is like 30 to 50% of all the transports of heavy goods in the city. And we put in a construction consolidation center to optimize the movements of this, and we're able to reduce the emissions there by about 49%. And a lot of other mobility issues, like putting in electric scooters outside of the building, which were then used by the tenants, and electric vehicles through car sharing in lots right beside these renovated buildings. Now, the project has ended, but we did receive the prize as the world's smartest city at the Barcelona Smart City Congress and Expo. Last time it was in a physical mode, which was 2019. And I'd say that most of these solutions now are being used in other cities, in other parts of our cities, and are growing. And I believe that by demonstrating smart solutions and really evaluate them, you can sometimes overcome the risks or the people's aversions against trying something new. People are often very conservative and scared of trying new things.
Gustaf, we are over time. Oh, great. Thank you.
And I could have told you a lot about adaptation, climate adaptation as well, but that we save for some other time.
Definitely, it will be necessary probably. Thank you very much for your presentation. People have been very aware in the room, and there was a question. It's tricky with a tool. I just have, it pops up, it went away. I think it was from somebody in the room. So if you are there, you can readdress the question. Maria, would you be so kind to take the microphone, exactly, and pose the question? Yeah, plug it on.
Oh yeah, this is how it works. Hi, Maria Hansen from ILIA. Thank you very much. Very, very inspiring presentation. I'm wondering, especially for publicly owned buildings, what is the impact of the users or the tenants? How do they get involved in reaching the climate goals? The background to the question is that often these communities can be very motivated themselves to do something. And I'm just wondering how you give space to that.
Okay. If you take new developments, there you have the problem that you don't really know who's going to move in. But of course, the neighbors often have very much to say against new developments near their own places where they live. But if you take the already existing buildings, which are renovated, there we have a legislation saying that if you want to renovate buildings, you have to have an approval from the tenants in the buildings and through the tenants organization as well, approving the increase in the standard of the buildings, which also does affect their rental levels. So they are involved, and we had a lot in this process, as well as we normally have, a lot of work involving them in the process.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
Then if you take the planning process, there's also a very well-developed system for bringing in people's opinions and different organizations' opinions in the planning process as well.
I have a very quick question for the end. Do you have any problems through the supply chain problems since COVID? In renovating, in using solar, in using all these smart devices, etc. Any problems, batteries, etc., or not? In innovating?
Not that I heard of.
Okay.
There's a lot of other changes going on because of COVID, because people want to live in larger apartments. They don't need as much office space. People are not commuting as they were before. So there are many issues, which are many of them very positive, that we now have to take into account when we work with the planning of the city.
Very last question. We have, in the next session, after the coffee break, we have one more speaker, then we have a coffee break of a quarter of an hour. We have 3 DGs from energy, internal market, and education. Which question would you ask to them? Because in Stockholm and Scandinavia, you are very successful in changing regulation and laws, etc. So which question would you ask them?
I would say that our largest challenge is getting away from fossil fuels from vehicles. And what we have to find is a way of phasing out fossil fuels by 2030, or we won't be able to reach our climate goals.
That is the perfect bridge to our next speaker. Gustaf, because, and maybe I take the floor now to introduce him. It's Ciarán CUFFE. He comes from Ireland, but and I will say more about him. Thank you very much, Gustaf, for this highly inspiring presentation. Can we have it as an open source?
Yes.
We can have it, so it will be shared with all the people who want to have it. Thank you very, very much. Yeah, there's an applause for your presentation. Thank you very much for these insights. And we knew from you now how important networks are, so we are very happy to be at ICE. We have 3 Slido questions directly related to your topic of mobility. And I'm very keen on having you all in the Slido poll. So our next question is related to the Cité d'un quart d'heure, the 15-minute city. The city you live in, please go back to Slido. The city you live in, are you able to access without a car, within 15 minutes, your most used services? Job, food shops, health services, school, sports, cultural, etc. All the facilities. So we only have 5 people answering yet. We are waiting for some more to answer. And I know you're already there, Ciarán. So maybe that resonates, the answers of these 3 polls, to what you will say. So this is probably like 2/3. 2/3 of you say yes, 1/3 says no. Let us go to the next Slido question. We want to know from you, because I think the figures will not change so much. How do you mainly commute? By car, bike, foot, plane? Or hopefully not plane or public transport, but we wanted to put it in. But architects, I think in earlier times, they flew a lot. Okay, that's interesting. Oh, a lot by bike. I think, I hope this is not a wishful answer. I hope this is an honest answer. Okay, car and bike almost to the same degree. And we have a very last Slido question. Do you own a car? Do you share the car? So sticking with the mobility question, or do you own it? Or you or your partner, let's say. So in your family household, do you own a car, or yes or no? No, that's a loud answer in the room. What? 30%, is that good or bad? They do, yeah, is that surprising? Hey, it's surprising already. So, okay, that's a figure we have to work on. Okay, so funny enough, okay, 70% yes. So we will ask the question 2030 where we are. Now, already having talked about you, Ciarán, thank you all for participating. He has been a city councillor, TD, and a Minister of State, and he's now very proud to serve as Dublin's Green MEP for the Transport and Energy Committees. Ciarán, good to have you. I hope you're there.
Thank you. And really good to be with you.
Good to be, yeah, good to be with you.
So just straight in there. And actually, I really like those questions. And I'm talking to you from the European Parliament here in Brussels. And interesting for a moment to reflect on those questions. I made a very deliberate decision about 30 years ago to live in the centre of Dublin, because I was sick and tired of commuting by bus and by car from 10 miles outside of Dublin. And while I lived in a beautiful home in the countryside, a huge amount of my life was dominated by travel. So I've lived in the centre of Dublin for the last 30 years, and I've brought up my children there. And it means that my daily commute is generally by walking or by bike, which is all very positive. And I don't have a car. My wife has a car, but I guess we use the car once or twice a week. And, you know, I think deliberately setting out to think about your transport choices is very important in the 21st century. And globally, we're seeing this shift of children choosing a lifestyle that is sometimes different from their parents. And the children sometimes see the car as enslaving rather than liberating. So we've almost come full circle on that. But then, of course, the contradictions in my life as an MEP. I'm on a plane a lot more than I used to be. I try and commute by boat and rail when I can, but the journey from Dublin to Brussels is about 12 hours by boat and train. and somewhat challenging in the middle of a pandemic. So there were periods where I was flying more than I would have previously. But as we return to normality, I'm maybe taking a slow travel option, about 1 trip in 4. And also, I deliberately choose not to fly as often as many people do within the institution that I serve. So sometimes I spend a weekend in Brussels rather than fly home. And I think we all have to think about the climate action in our lives and in the buildings that we design. And I think we're also realizing the interconnectedness, not just of our personal actions, but of the buildings that we design, that we refurbish, that we occupy. And I was really pleased to hear the previous speakers make the link between low carbon buildings and mobility, and also talk about issues such as sustainable drainage systems and urban heat islands. And I think there's fantastic research available to us now. And within the European Union, within the Brussels bubble that I operate, we're trying to encapsulate many of these issues into the legislation that we are putting forward. The new European Bauhaus has been a great initiative by the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen. As she said, it's putting the soul into the European Green Deal. I'm particularly pleased about it because my late father was an architect who studied under Walter Gropius at the original Bauhaus, when it had moved to the United States. So I do like the sense of continuity. And when I think about a new European Bauhaus, I think about it continuing that push to get beyond the actual physical buildings, but to think about the design of objects and to think about the design of the wider environment. I think in the 21st century, we're thinking a lot more about the gender impact of what we do. We're recognizing our privilege as architects, and I think we need to be much more engaged with the communities and the clients that we serve. And I think a huge amount of this comes from recognizing that we want to live in a world where temperatures stabilize to 1.5 degrees of warming or less. And sadly, we're not on track to do that. So we have a huge challenge ahead. And when I look at it from the perspective of the European Union, I look at 220 million homes in Europe, and I want to try and ensure that we get almost all of those up and to an A energy rating within the next 30 years. So it is an extraordinary challenge. It will, however, provide the green jobs of today and the green jobs of the future for the next 30 years. And I think we need to ensure a just transition. So we therefore need to start with public housing and bring people out of energy poverty, out of fuel poverty, and out of buildings that are too cold in the winter or too warm in the summer. So the European Parliament is producing what we call an own initiative report on the new European Bauhaus, and I'm involved with that through the Green Group. And we think the new European Bauhaus will allow us to look at our policies through the lens of art, technology, and design, and deliver a sustainable environment and ensure buildings are safe and healthy. And I think, particularly as we look at the impact of the pandemic, we're recognizing the importance of both indoor air quality and of private outdoor space within our buildings. So very simply, any living accommodation should have a balcony. And also, as we move to weather-tight, fully sealed buildings, certainly during the winter months, we need to ensure that they have a minimum amount of air changes per hour. And some member states, some countries have very tight regulations on this. Some countries don't. But we need to be acutely aware of the importance of indoor air quality as we change the laws that we have. So we have this Fit for 55 package, and this is 16 draft laws that will try and reduce the greenhouse gas emissions in Europe by 55% between the year 1990 and the year 2030. And the directive that, or the law that is probably of most relevance to the architecture and design community is the European Building Performance Directive. And you're probably familiar with that through your member state and through your own country's legislation. We had the original Energy Performance in Buildings Directive around the year 2000. We had the redrafting of that directive a decade ago, and we're now about to restart redrafting that directive for a third time. And the kind of issues that the previous speakers have talked about in terms of water use, in terms of embodied energy going into buildings, in terms of the move to transport and mobility being integrated with our buildings, all of these issues will figure in the draft directive, which will be released before the end of the year. We've seen some leaks from that directive which suggest that all of the issues that you have mentioned will be on the table. And of course, as some of you have already said, the most sustainable building is the one that has already been built. Anna's project encompassed this, but also the Pritzker Prize winners, Anne Lacton and Philippe Vassal, their work on public housing in France exemplifies that work as well. So the European Building Performance Directive, we also have the Energy Efficiency Directive and the Renewable Energy Directive. So these three draft laws will reshape the built environment. Very simply, they will put pressure on us as architects and as built environment practitioners to make our buildings much greener over the upcoming years. And because I sit on the Transport as well as the Energy Committee of the Parliament, I'm working on ensuring that charging infrastructure is available within our buildings, charging for all types of e-vehicles, from electric assisted bikes to e-scooters to electric vehicles. And a word of caution, we're not going to save the planet by simply replacing 1 million petrol and diesel cars with 1 million electric cars. We need to reduce our private car use. We need to improve our neighborhoods for walking and cycling. And actually, the pandemic related measures in most of our cities are a good example of that. And my hope is that we will retain those measures after the pandemic. And then absolutely the example of Paris shows what the vision and dynamism of a mayor like Anne Hidalgo with public support can do. However, many of our cities do not have the type of green and social leadership that Hidalgo has brought to Paris. So I think we all as citizens need to put our elected representatives under pressure. Just one simple example, and I know my time is running out.
Yes.
I was recently in a friend's new building in Dublin, and the building is a passive house, so it has a very high energy rating. There are photovoltaics on the roof, and his electric vehicle sits beside the house, and there is a battery pack there as well. And essentially, the building provides the energy for his transport and mobility needs, and it also contributes electricity back to the grid. That's probably a good example of what the future will look like, but all those other factors of water, embodied energy, and hopefully of design and beauty will figure in our discussions in Europe over the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ciarán. Applause in the room. Thank you. 1 minute till the coffee pause, so I don't want to eat it up. I want to come back to Georg. Yeah, Georg, you have a question. Your question.
Yes, I have a question. I mean, I have a remark because I heard you saying about the indoor air quality. I'm actually a big fan of opening windows, and shouldn't be a bit more focus also on simple systems. This is my first question or remark, and my question is actually, we know that there is. If we are building, we get the wood from Siberia. We have no influence on that if we order wood. We get the bricks and whatever material is carried up and down, and also Bavarian milk is brought to Greece, made yogurt there, perhaps then packed in Poland and sold again in Bavaria. Isn't perhaps transportation simply too cheap?
Are you still there, Ciarán? Or did we lose you?
I am, and I just caught the last four words. Is transport too cheap?
Is transport too cheap? Exactly. He gave a lot of examples how material is traveling from wood to milk through whole Europe and back. Is transportation too cheap?
Yeah, I think we need to put a significant price on carbon and also ensure that the more vulnerable are protected from the high price of carbon. You know, I did a lot of work 10 years ago with an organization based in the Pacific Northwest of the United States, the Living Futures Institute. And it went beyond BREEAM, it went beyond many of the green metric measures. And its manifesto said that the materials should not come from, I think, more than 500 kilometers away. And the consultants, the building professionals, perhaps should not come from more than 1,000 kilometers away. So it was a very deep green approach to buildings in suggesting that we should use local materials, as many of us have always done, but that we should be quite wary of bringing stuff from far away. And when you look at the huge increase in greenhouse gas emissions in Europe, an awful lot of that is coming from transport. And yes, I do think we need to think about this, but I know that in the public eye, this would be perceived as the nanny state and telling people what to do. I think the price on carbon will help, though.
Anna Heringer said the same thing earlier this morning. Asking you as an MEP, very last question, how can the NEB, the New European Bauhaus Initiative, in the future be even more relevant and more effective? What is your advice? Short answer.
I think it's important to ensure that the European Parliament is kept under pressure on the importance of design and the importance of integrating what we do with the other sectors. I think an interdisciplinary approach is hugely important. As buildings get more complex, we need to make sure that engineers, architects, quantity surveyors, energy professionals are all talking to each other, and that at the early stage of the design process, we integrate these different professionals into talking the same language. Because I think all too often we dwell in silos, and we only emerge at a meeting quite far into the design process. I have a background in urban planning as a spatial planner. There is a need as architects to engage more with spatial planners, because I think a lot of the solutions will come from looking at issues at a city region base, at a city region level, as well as at the scale of the individual building.
And I have a very last quick question, only yes or no. I come back to the first words of Georg this morning. Demolition as an excuse. Is that part of your 3 programs, directives you have been addressing in your speech? Hey, what did I say? Demolition? No, sorry, I quoted you wrongly. What did I say? Demolition as an exception. So reuse before demolition. Is that part of your directives?
When we consider the embodied energy in the energy performance of buildings directive rewording, yes, because it will often show that the older building is better reused than demolished. And you've all dealt with this argument from developers who say the ceiling heights are too low, we cannot deal with it, there's asbestos in the building. Very often there is a move towards demolition, but I think we have to resist that and use our creativity to make the case for retaining the buildings that we already have.
Okay. We might quote you on Twitter. Thank you very much, Ciarán. And were the last words before the coffee pause. Sorry to go over time. Now we have coffee pause until 11:25. We restart with our fellow DG colleagues at 11:25. Grab your coffee outside. Please stay tuned with us. We will not have an empty space virtually. Be curious during the coffee pause, and we see you back again on the web at 11:25. Thank you all very much for your attention. Thank you, Ciarán.